I've always been the quiet type, the kind of person who doesn't crave attention or go looking for the spotlight. And honestly, that's how I like it. My name is Doreen. I'm 58 years old, and I live in New Jersey. For the last 20 years, I've built my own business, a small but successful consultancy firm. I'm intelligent, driven, and confident in my own skin. But that wasn't always the case. Back in high school, I was the one who tried to blend into the background to avoid drawing attention. I was the shy, awkward girl who struggled with weight issues. I wore thick glasses that made my world feel a little too blurry and a little too sharp at the same time. I wasn't ugly, but I wasn't pretty either, not by the standards of those days. And that made me a target. But those days are long gone. I'm no longer that insecure teenager. Time has a way of changing things. I've worked hard to become who I am, and I wear my confidence like armor now. Then came the letter. It came in a plain, unremarkable envelope with the school logo printed on the front. The kind of logo that once filled me with dread, the kind that made my heart race with memories I'd rather forget. A high school reunion. 40 years had passed since I last saw those faces. Some of them I couldn't even remember. Others, well, they'd never left my mind. I stared at the envelope for a long time, the weight of the past pressing down on me. I didn't know why it bothered me so much. I had no desire to go, no real interest in seeing anyone again. But a small part of me couldn't shake the thought, what if this is the moment I've been waiting for? I wasn't sure what I was hoping for. Closure, maybe. Or a reminder of how far I've come. Or perhaps a chance to show them. Show them the woman I'd become. The woman who wasn't a joke anymore. After a few more minutes of hesitation, I put the invitation down and walked away. I had a lot to do, after all. But the thought lingered. The thought of returning to the place where it all began, where I was nothing. A week passed, and I found myself staring at the letter again. This time, I didn't hesitate. I RSP'd. I was going. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't talk to my friends about it. I just went. I figured I would go for myself, nothing more, nothing less. The night of the reunion arrived, and I put on my best suit. Classic black, nothing too flashy, just enough to let people see I was confident without saying a word. As I stood in front of the mirror, I noticed how different I looked now. My hair had a few more grays than I remembered, but it was stylish, not the limp brown mess I used to have. My body, too, had changed. I'd lost the weight years ago, and now I felt comfortable in my skin, not self-conscious. Still, a tiny part of me couldn't help but feel that old, familiar flutter of insecurity in my chest. I hadn't stepped foot inside that school in decades, and here I was, about to face all of them again. I drove to the venue, my thoughts swirling with questions. Would anyone even remember me? Or would I be nothing more than a forgotten face in the crowd? I parked and stood in front of the building for a long moment, letting the cool night air steady my nerves. I had nothing to prove to anyone, I told myself, but a part of me still wanted to prove it to her. I didn't know why. I hadn't seen Janet since the day we graduated, and yet here I was, thinking about her again, the way she used to laugh at me, the way she'd make me feel small. Ridiculous, right? I took a deep breath and walked inside. The lobby was full of people mingling, chatting, laughing. It was as if time hadn't passed at all, like we were all still those same people from high school. But I didn't feel like I belonged. I felt like an outsider again, like I didn't fit. I spotted a few familiar faces from the past, people I barely recognized. Some looked older, some hadn't changed much, but no one noticed me. I was just another face in the crowd. And that was fine. Really, I wasn't here for them. I made my way to the refreshments table trying to blend in, but then something caught my eye. There she was, Janet. She hadn't changed at all. Same blonde hair, same loud laugh, same smug look on her face as she stood in a circle with a group of people, dominating the conversation. I couldn't help but stare. She hadn't noticed me. Not yet, at least. I took a deep breath, feeling that old, familiar sting, only this time it didn't hurt so much. I wasn't that girl anymore. I wasn't the one she could push around. I smiled to myself, a little sad that the years hadn't softened her. But I wasn't here for revenge. I wasn't here to pick a fight. I was here for me, for what I had become. I wasn't expecting anything more than a brief moment in time. But then I saw him, Rick. I hadn't expected to see him either. The room seemed to shrink when I saw him. Rick, the one I'd never forgotten, but who had never really noticed me back then. At least, not in the way I'd hoped. He had been the star of our high school, the golden boy, the one who had it all, athletic, popular, charming. I was just a shadow in his world, a girl trying not to be seen. Back in those days, I had admired him from afar, always too shy to approach him, too insecure to believe that someone like him could ever take an interest in someone like me. But I remember the moments when he'd smile my way or offer me a kind word. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make my heart race. I would spend weeks thinking about it, replaying it in my mind, even though I knew it meant nothing. He was too perfect for someone like me. But here he was, standing across the room with a drink in his hand, casually talking to a few old classmates. He looked different. Older, yes, with a few more lines on his face, his hair a little thinner. But he still had that charm, that presence, the kind of person who could command a room without even trying, the kind of person who, years ago, made me feel invisible. But now I couldn't look away. I stood there for a moment, frozen. I didn't know why, but the thought of him seeing me, really seeing me, felt like a moment I couldn't miss. Not for revenge, not for anything childish like that. Just to know that I was finally the woman I had worked so hard to become. The woman who had nothing to prove, but everything to show. I took a breath and walked toward him, trying to calm the pounding of my heart. I wasn't sure what I expected, but as I neared, I could feel the weight of his gaze on me. And then he smiled. Not the shy, uncertain smile of the boy I once admired, but something more genuine, more knowing. Something that made me pause, just for a beat. Doreen, he said, his voice warm and surprised. I smiled back, feeling a strange mix of nostalgia and calmness. Yes, it's me. He blinked, taking a step closer, his expression shifting to one of disbelief. Wow, you look incredible. I never would have recognized you. I couldn't help but laugh softly. I imagine I've changed a lot since high school. He nodded, his eyes studying me, like he was trying to place the pieces of a puzzle together. You definitely have, in a good way. There was an odd pause, as though he was searching for the right words. I'm sorry, No need to apologize, I interrupted, a little more sharply than I intended. It wasn't that I wanted to be rude, but the old, familiar sense of being invisible was creeping back. The part of me that used to hope Rick would notice me was still there, even after all these years. And yet, in this moment, I was aware that the girl I once was long gone. It's fine, I added, softer now. We were never really close back then, were we? Rick winced, clearly taken aback by my words. No, I guess not, he admitted, looking uncomfortable. I I wish I had done things differently back then. His words surprised me, but it wasn't the kind of apology I expected. It was something deeper, something more genuine. He wasn't just trying to make amends for his past behavior. There was something else there, a quiet understanding, a subtle shift in the air that made me pause. I didn't know what to make of it, but I didn't want to push. Instead, I smiled, hoping my expression conveyed that it was okay. It's all right. We were all a little different back then. For a long moment, we stood there, the noise of the reunion swirling around us. I could see Janet out of the corner of my eye, laughing with a group of her friends, her face alight with the same smug self-assurance she had back in high school. I could feel the old anger stirring in my chest, but I pushed it aside. This wasn't about her. This was about me, about Rick and me. So, how's life been treating you? I asked, casually, though I could feel the weight of the question. I didn't know why I wanted to ask it, but I did. Maybe I just wanted to know if the man standing before me was happy, or if the life he had created for himself had been as perfect as he once seemed. Rick sighed, running a hand through his thinning hair. You know, life's been interesting, not as glamorous as I thought it would be. A lot of things have changed. I raised an eyebrow, sensing the hesitation in his tone. In what way? He glanced at me, then away, as though he was choosing his words carefully. My marriage, for one, he muttered, almost under his breath. But I heard it, and my curiosity piqued, my mind immediately jumping to the most obvious conclusion. Janet? I asked before I could stop myself. Rick's eyes flickered to mine, and for the briefest moment, I could see something in them. Something sad, something weary. Yeah, Janet, it's been rough. He paused again, as if weighing whether or not to continue. I don't think either of us knows who we are anymore. We've been drifting for a long time. My heart squeezed. It wasn't like I cared. Well, maybe I did, just a little. But the reality was, Rick was still married to Janet, and I wasn't here to cause trouble. Still, something about his words struck a chord in me, something that made me want to know more. Maybe I had been right all along to trust the journey I had taken. Maybe it wasn't just the weight I had shed that had transformed me. Maybe it was everything, every choice, every step forward. And now, standing here, talking to Rick, it felt like all those years of self-doubt, of not being enough, had finally led me to this point. I'm sorry, I said softly. It must be difficult. Rick nodded, his expression unreadable for a moment. It is, but I guess I'm just trying to figure things out. I looked him in the eye, sensing something deeper in his gaze. He was more than just the high school heartthrob. There was a quiet vulnerability there, one that matched my own in ways I hadn't expected. I'm glad you're figuring it out, I said gently, but you don't have to do it alone. Rick's lips parted slightly, as though he were about to say something more, but before he could speak, I heard the unmistakable sound of Janet's voice booming from across the room, pulling us both back to reality. It wasn't the perfect moment. It wasn't even close to what I'd imagined. But as I stood there, talking to Rick, really talking to him, I realized something. The past didn't define me anymore, and maybe, just maybe, I could have a future that was all my own. It had been a few weeks since the reunion, but I couldn't shake the memory of that conversation with Rick. There was something lingering in the air, an unspoken connection that neither of us had fully acknowledged, but both of us could feel. It wasn't something I had expected to happen, not with Rick, not with anyone. I had moved on from the past, from the high school halls where I had been invisible, but something about that night made me reconsider everything. I couldn't deny it anymore. I was curious. I was drawn to him. But there was also a part of me that reminded myself to be cautious. He was still married to Janet, and despite the cracks he'd admitted existed in their relationship, I wasn't about to get tangled up in someone else's mess. I had worked too hard to build my life, my business, my confidence. I wasn't about to lose all that for someone who wasn't ready to make a real change. Still, I found myself thinking about him more often than I cared to admit. What would life have been like if things had been different? If Rick had seen me, really seen me, back in high school? What if things had been different for both of us? I tried to push those thoughts away. But then, one afternoon, I got a message that changed everything. It came through on my phone while I was in the middle of a meeting. I glanced down at the screen and my heart skipped a beat. It was from Rick. Hey, Doreen, it's Rick. I know it's been a while, but I've been thinking about our conversation at the reunion. I was wondering if you'd like to meet up sometime. Maybe grab coffee? I'd love to catch up more if you're open to it. I stared at the message for a long moment, the words echoing in my mind. A part of me wanted to jump at the opportunity, to take a step into the unknown and see where it led. But another part of me hesitated. Was I really ready for this? Was I ready to face whatever consequences this might bring? I could hear Janet's laughter in my head, taunting me, just like it had back in high school. But it was different now. I was different. And if Rick truly wanted to see me, then maybe I wasn't the only one who had changed. I sent a quick reply, trying to sound casual, though I could feel the butterflies in my stomach. Sure, Rick. I like that. Let me know when you're free. The next day, we arranged to meet at a small cafe downtown, the kind of place that felt warm and intimate, yet private enough for a real conversation. I arrived early, trying to steady my nerves. As I sat at the table, I caught sight of Rick walking in, looking as handsome as I remembered, though with a few more lines around his eyes. He had always been confident, but now there was something different about him, a weariness that seemed to sit in his gaze, something more real than the polished, perfect image he had once presented. He smiled when he saw me, that same warm, genuine smile that had caught me off guard at the reunion. Doreen, he said, his voice low and familiar, I'm really glad you agreed to meet me. I. I smiled back, feeling the tension in my chest ease just a little. Me too, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. He sat down across from me, and for a moment, we just looked at each other, neither of us knowing exactly what to say. The silence stretched, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was calming in a way. Finally, Rick spoke again, his tone hesitant but honest. I've been thinking about what you said at the reunion, about not being the person I used to be, and I've realized I've spent a lot of time just going through the motions. Janet and we've been living separate lives for a long time. I guess I've just been too scared to admit it, too scared to make a change. I nodded, understanding more than I let on. Change is hard, but sometimes it's the only way to move forward. Rick gave a small, rueful laugh. Yeah, I've been stuck in the past, I think. I've been afraid of what might happen if I leave that behind. But after seeing you again, after hearing what you had to say, I'm starting to realize maybe it's time to let go of all the old ideas of who I was supposed to be, who I thought I should be. I didn't know what to say to that. It wasn't like I had any answers for him. I wasn't here to fix him or to give him advice, but there was something in his eyes that made me want to listen, to understand, and for a brief moment, I let myself entertain the thought of what could happen next. Could we, could I, really start something new with him? Something real? But before I could say anything, Rick leaned in slightly, his expression turning more serious. I need to be honest with you, Doreen. I know this is sudden, but I'm not happy in my marriage. It's been a long time since I've been truly happy, and I can't keep pretending that everything's fine when it's not. I felt a strange pang in my chest. I wasn't sure what I had expected him to say, but this was more than I had anticipated. It wasn't just about us reconnecting. It was about him making a decision about his life, his future. You don't have to do anything right now, he added quickly. But I wanted you to know. I wanted you to know that I've been thinking about all of this. I sat back, processing his words. My mind raced. A part of me wanted to jump in and reassure him, to tell him that everything would be okay. But I knew better. I knew that this was his journey, his decision to make. I'm glad you're being honest with me, Rick, I said, my voice steady despite the swirl of emotions inside me. But you don't need to rush. Take your time. I'm not going anywhere. He smiled at that, and for the first time since we'd met up, the tension seemed to lift. I appreciate that, really. We spent the rest of the afternoon talking about everything and nothing, memories from high school, the strange twists our lives had taken since then, the little things that had shaped us into who we were today. There was no pressure, no expectation, just two people talking as equals, as if the past didn't matter. But in the back of my mind, something was growing, something I hadn't expected, something more than just curiosity. And as much as I tried to suppress it, I couldn't ignore the feeling that this was only the beginning. The next few months passed in a blur. After that day at the cafe, Rick and I kept in touch. Our conversations were casual at first, but they grew deeper, more personal. We shared everything, the highs and lows of our lives, the regrets, the dreams we still clung to despite the years that had passed. But beneath all of that, there was an undeniable connection between us, something that neither of us had planned for but couldn't deny. I had tried to keep my distance, not wanting to get too involved in his problems. I wasn't looking for a hero or a knight in shining armor. I had built my life on my own terms, and I wasn't about to lose myself in someone else's mess. But the more time I spent talking to Rick, the more I saw the man he had become. Not the high school jock or the man married to Janet, but someone who had lived through his own battles and scars. Someone who, like me, had been shaped by the past but was ready to move beyond it. But I wasn't blind to the situation. Rick was still married to Janet, and despite the cracks in their relationship, he hadn't made any moves to leave her. I wasn't about to play the role of the other woman, no matter how much I might have enjoyed the way he made me feel. So I kept my distance, telling myself that this was just a friendship, a connection, nothing more. Then, one evening, Rick called me. "I need to talk to you," he said, his voice strained. "Can we meet tomorrow?" I agreed immediately, though I had no idea what he was about to say. The knot in my stomach tightened as I thought about the possibilities. Could he finally be ready to make a decision about his marriage? Was this the moment he would choose to leave Janet for good? The next day, we met at the same cafe, the one that had become our quiet spot. This time, though, something felt different. The air between us was charged, like we were both standing on the edge of something. Something important, something that could change everything. Rick sat down across from me, his usual easy smile replaced by something more serious. His hands fidgeted with his coffee cup as he avoided my gaze. It wasn't like him. "Doreen," he began, his voice low, almost hesitant. "I've been thinking a lot about everything. About my marriage, about my life, about what I want. And I need to be honest with you. I can't keep pretending that things are okay with Janet. They haven't been for a long time." I didn't interrupt, though my heart was racing. This was it, the moment I had been dreading, the moment I had known was coming, but still wasn't prepared for. "I don't want to hurt anyone," Rick continued, looking up at me with a mix of guilt and determination. "But I can't stay in a marriage that's falling apart. I can't keep living a lie." He took a deep breath before meeting my eyes. "I want a chance with you, Doreen. I know this isn't easy. I know it's complicated, but I don't want to keep living in the past. I want to move forward, and I want to do that with you." My mind was spinning. I wasn't sure what to say. Rick had just told me everything I had secretly hoped for, but now that it was laid out in front of me, I found myself torn. On one hand, I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that he was telling the truth, that he had spent all these years waiting for the right moment, for the right person to come along. But on the other hand, I wasn't stupid. I knew that the end of a marriage wasn't something that could be fixed overnight. I knew that the scars left by Janet, the years of resentment and bitterness, wouldn't just disappear. I don't want to be your escape, Rick, I said quietly, my voice steady even though my emotions were anything but. I don't want to be the reason you leave her. I need to know that this isn't just about running away from something else. Rick reached across the table, his hand hovering over mine before gently taking it. His touch was warm, comforting, but also filled with urgency. It's not about running away, he said firmly. It's about moving towards something real, something that matters. And what matters to me right now is you. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to give in, to let myself believe that this was it, that we could build something new, something beautiful together. But another part of me knew the risks. There were so many unknowns, so many variables that we couldn't control. Was I willing to risk my peace of mind, my hard-earned independence, for someone who wasn't sure he was ready to leave everything behind? I pulled my hand away from his, my mind racing. I need time, Rick. I need time to think about this. I can't just jump into something without understanding the consequences. Rick nodded, his expression softening. I understand. I'll wait. I'm not going anywhere, Doreen. Take all the time you need. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I was at a crossroads. Everything I had worked for, everything I had become, was suddenly being called into question. Did I want to risk it all for the chance at something with Rick? Did I want to be the woman who got involved in a messy situation, or the one who walked away and kept her dignity intact? I didn't have the answers yet, but I knew one thing for certain. Whatever happened, I would do it on my terms. No one, not even Rick, could make that decision for me. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid to make the choice.